Welcome to VM Blog's Crosstalk series. We're going to be exploring some interesting topics that are a little bit outside of the norm that VM Blog usually covers. And to kick this off, I have the pleasure of having Jeremy Kauffman with me in the studio. He's the founder and CEO of LBRY and Odysee. How you doing?
Doing great. It's great to be here with you today, Brian.
Well, thanks for joining me in this new series. Why don't you start, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you start LBRY and what LBRY is.
Sure. So I have a background in computer science as well as a background as an entrepreneur. I previously founded a much more boring company than this one, so I won't talk about it at too much length, but I have a lot of experience creating software, trying to make it usable for people, and I fell in love with blockchain, basically as soon as I learned about it. Blockchain technologies like Bitcoin, public blockchains, they're really innovative. I sometimes introduce them to people as the world's worst database technology, but they do something really cool, which is it's a database that is not owned by any one person. So we can have this database where we have consensus without there being this centralized control. And I'm a big sort of information freedom on the internet kind of person. And I fell in love with this idea of using a public blockchain to provide a catalog of content. So this idea that we can have user-friendly experiences similar to services like a YouTube or a Spotify, but without the same level of centralized control. And once I got this idea in my head, I kind of couldn't shake it. And once I couldn't shake it, I had to start building it. And now today, LBRY is probably the most used decentralized application in the world, certainly the most used non-financial one. There's financial elements, but it's not trying to be money like Bitcoin is.
Right.
Odysee.com is the most popular way to use LBRY. It's used by millions of people every day. It's used by big creators like Tim Pool, Veritasium, Minute Physics, a bunch of big tech creators, a bunch of Linux people are on there. And it lets us take much more control over our online identities, and it gets rid of a lot of the downsides of big tech.
Can you go into a little more detail about blockchain? We've all heard of blockchain because of Bitcoin and the popularity of it. But for me, I'm still trying to understand how blockchain works.
Yeah, well, do you want me to kind of explain how blockchain works, like a blockchain 101? How does a public blockchain work? So you in a public blockchain, you basically have a series of escalating puzzles that are computationally difficult to solve, but that are easy to verify. And then, of course, we have lots of computer science problems in this space. But you use this property called proof of work of allowing these various nodes to compete to solve the next puzzle. And this is called finding a block when you solve this, right? And so when someone wants to make an update to the database, it's called a transaction, just like with a normal database. That transaction is broadcast to the network. It's then broadcast peer-to-peer, so the various nodes tell other nodes about those transactions. As part of the competition to solve the puzzle, those transactions are included. It's a hashing puzzle, so those transactions are included in the hash. So when you announce that you've solved the puzzle, those transactions go into the block, and then that's announced to the other nodes, and those nodes then start building on top of that block. So it's very interesting. It's very slow. It's very expensive. It's difficult to change. So there's a lot of downsides. But what it lets us do is it allows much more control, because now there's not one node that you can go to and say, change these records. So this is what allows Bitcoin to have the property of, well, if I have my private keys, that Bitcoin is mine and no one can take it from me. And similarly with LBRY, your identity is yours. The identity under which you're publishing is yours. You own your online identity. No one can take it from you. So you're building up a following on a place like YouTube. You're basically a renter. You're a tenant farmer, right? You have to agree to their rules. If they change the rules, you're done. If they want to kick you off the farm, you're out.
Right.
And so this takes it much. This sort of sometimes we say that we do to publishing what Bitcoin does to money. So it's the user experience is similar, but the properties of ownership, the properties of incentives are a lot different.
Now, let's say I have a video, I've uploaded it to Odysee, and now you're saying that belongs to me, right?
And by the way, this is not theoretical, right? You've done this,
Yeah,
right? So,
actually, we have.
Yeah.
VM just transferred all of our like 420 videos over onto Odysee recently. It was smooth. I mean, I think it took maybe 5-6 hours, and everything was up there. It was pretty impressive.
That's right, and that's where my background of trying to make software easy to use, I think, has come in very handily in the blockchain space, where a lot of blockchain software can be very cumbersome. We've put a lot of focus on making it very easy to use. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can go over to odysee.com, ODYSE.com. This is the most popular way to use LBRY. You can also get LBRY Desktop, which is the sort of fuller, more decentralized version. But the easiest way to get started, and there you can transfer between one and the other. The easiest way to get started is go to odysee.com. You can pull up the VM blog channel on there, and you can switch, and you can start watching this show over there, and just dip your toe in the water and kind of see what it's like. So I will say that. And if you have a YouTube channel, very easy to sync it, as Brian said. So if you're a YouTube creator yourself, very easy to port everything over. Now, I think I ignored part of your question, though. So
Yeah, I mean, so my question is, okay, I now I own the rights to my video, right? I own that video. It's on the blockchain, or the pointer to it is on the blockchain, right?
That's right. That's right. So you own your channel. When you publish that video, a record is created on the blockchain that contains all of the metadata. That's things like the title, when was it created, might be tags, might be various, there's metadata can get quite rich. So there's a bunch of things that you can put into that metadata. Included in that metadata is a hash of the content and a pointer to a BitTorrent-like decentralized network where the data is actually stored. Among that metadata are the licensing rules, so in terms of in what ways people can access it. So you can, for example, say that people have to pay you money to access it, though typically the vast majority of content on the network is available for free. People choose to publish it for free. And so now that when we say that content is yours, it's yours in the legal sense, in the intellectual property sense. We do not claim to solve the challenging and I would say impossible problem of actually enforcing digital rights management. I think most technologically sophisticated people kind of get that that's basically an impossible problem. So you own the legal right to it. It would be illegal for someone to be accessing it in violation of the rules that you've sort of specified and put in that metadata.
Now, what's going to prevent somebody from, one of the big things with YouTube is censorship. They decide one day to change the rules, and now your video doesn't show up.
But just like, this is where Odysee and LBRY start to get different. So Odysee is a private company. Odysee has rules. There's content that Odysee doesn't allow. And so now Odysee, I think, has much better policy than YouTube does, but it's basically in that same space. If Odysee wants to block something from Odysee, it has the full right to do that. And it does do that. Even with some content that's legal, Odysee chooses to not distribute it. In the case of the LBRY network, which I think is the sort of more interesting from a technological perspective, the network is peer-to-peer, so we can't modify the blockchain records, and then the data network is peer-to-peer. So as long as peers are willing to host that data, it will remain available. Now, LBRY as a company does process legal requests, so if we're told that content is illegal or we become aware of illegal content, we will put out a message to the network that says, hey, this content is illegal, and if you have a copy of it, you ought to remove it. That's not something we can enforce, but most nodes are not interested in participating in in illegal activities, and so you're not going to find much content that's breaking the law or that kind of thing.
So help me understand the nodes. So where does this content actually live?
It's just like BitTorrent. So each file is actually, it's a little bit different. It's similar. Each file is actually broken up into chunks, into 2 megabyte chunks. These chunks contain no information about the file that they are a part of. So you have a DHT-like network that stands for distributed hash table, and everyone who's running a library client, as well as there are some providers and hosts that sort of participate in a larger scale, not just your desktop computer scale, they are participating in the library network just the way that BitTorrent works. So when you go and access a piece of content, first you query the blockchain to get the metadata. Then you say, oh, this is the hash. You use that hash and start fetching the blobs from the network. And when you've downloaded the whole file, they're assembled, although you can seek, so you don't even have to have the whole file. You can go out, it will computationally figure out that if you seek to this part in the file, that's this chunk that would be necessary. It goes out, it fetches it, and you're streaming a video.
So if let's say I had my stuff on Odysee, and now I decide, Odyssee's not working out for me. Is there a way to take that content and move it somewhere else?
So there's a command that you can. So we try actually not to label it specifically deleting, because technically you can't delete things from a blockchain, but you effectively can. So you issue a command that's we call it like unpublishing. You issue an unpublished command that instructs the blockchain nodes to not consider those previous records as valid. Blockchain nodes will not. Someone asks for some metadata lookup of some URL or some handle. If that's been unpublished, the blockchain nodes will not return it. Similarly, the data nodes, the data host nodes, should not continue to host that content. Now, we can't reach out into someone's computer. So in the same way that if you delete some video from YouTube, if someone's downloaded it and has a copy of it, it's kind of the way the internet works. Once something's out there, there's no guarantee it's gonna disappear. But this is just generally speaking, we don't see many problems in this area. There aren't these networks of people who are trying to host the deleted content and stuff like that.
Now, maybe we can take a step back to talk about the different components of library. We've talked about the blockchain, and you've got the blockchain, the application layer, and then you've got the data layer, from my understanding of it. Is that right?
Yeah. So you've got the blockchain layer, which is sort of the base layer that stores all the identity information, all the metadata, and it stores all of the payments and the balances. So there is a cryptocurrency involved. That cryptocurrency can be sent from channels. It can be sent to pay for content. There's also a staking system, which we use for this aspect of sort of how trustworthy things are. It's also used to resolve. It can be used to resolve disputes as well. So that's the blockchain layer. As I said, there's a pointer into the data network. Those two layers combined basically comprise what we call the library network. So when we talk about the library network or the library protocol, what we're basically saying is those two layers combined. And then you have applications, which is software that's built on top of that's using that network to sort of do the actual useful things. So we make a piece of software called the library SDK, which many people use to. That's the typical way that applications are developed. So you can look at something like Library Desktop, which is a client that we make that uses the library SDK, that provides a local wallet. It provides a really nice user interface that looks fairly similar to YouTube, that lets you search the network, download content, but now it's this entirely peer-to-peer. Thing. There are other applications. There's a CAD application. There's a music or podcast application. So there's some other things that people have built. This is also an area of active work and promotion for us. So we are encouraging new applications and new products to be built. So if you're a developer yourself and you're listening to this, you can come and get involved at lbry.tech. We have documentation, we have materials, and it's all permissionless. And that's one of the coolest parts about it. So if you come and build something on Library, there are already millions of identities. So sort of like millions of people already have. It's not really like an account, so we try to not use that word, but basically they already have an account, they already have a handle. There's all of this content that can be queried, that can be accessed, that can be displayed. And so it's a great framework for building applications in the digital content space. If you want to build these D-apps, these decentralized apps, Library is a really great foundation to do it on.
Well, let's talk about what's the future of Library. Could you envision it being used in other ways, like, for instance, some kind of corporate document library, for instance? Or...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that There are right now, like one of the scaling challenges that we'll have to face is definitely how do you push the network past around several 100 million pieces of content, and obviously we want to get to billions. And if you're talking about all the documents in the world, you're talking about very, very, very large numbers. There is a cost to publishing. It's a very small amount, but there is a cost. So, I think LBRY scales very, very well as this sort of decentralized identity system, this decentralized publishing system. I'm not certain if LBRY will be used at scale for... Basically, I think it's a bad solution for content that you don't want to be public, at least in the current design. So if you're a corporation, I think if you're talking about documents that you want the world to know about, if you're a corporation that wants to say publish, hey, these are press releases, or you want to have a tamper-proof way of releasing information to the public and people can know if you've changed it or updated it, I think it works great for corporations in that regard. If you're talking about documents that are private corporate documents, I would guess that LBRY probably doesn't end up being used that way. Yeah.
It's interesting to think of what the possibilities are of the future, and you could also somebody could branch LBRY, right, or they could fork it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm all for that.
It's open source.
I'm a big I'm both a big fan of open source and I am a big fan of free competition because I think that's how we keep things good. I've been an open source guy. Basically my whole life. I started using Linux when I was like 15. I will admit it didn't really stick with me until I was 18 or 19, but I've been on Linux as my primary desktop, primary operating system for 20 years. And not quite 20, almost 20 years. So long time. We've come a long way. And I think, I actually just to kind of check it out. I like to what's the latest version of Windows? What's it like? Oh my God, man, Windows 10. I was like, it was killing me. It made me like sign in, and I had to create an account just to operate my operating system. I'm like, we've fallen so far. But I don't know. Obviously, I think our computers could be so much better when we are, and our software, I guess, not just not computers, our software can be so much better if we keep things competitive. Because I think that's what big tech does. What big tech does, and this is like literally the explicit VC model, is they're like, okay, we're going to create something that's really good, and we're going to make it free, and then we're going to corner the market, and we're going to squeeze you, and we're going to twist the dial, and we're going to cripple our software on purpose, right? I could talk for half an hour about ways that Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and so on have purposefully crippled their software to make more money off of you. Yeah. And I think that open source kind of prevents this. And so I see LBRY as really becoming a foundational part of the internet. I think it can be the primary way that certainly all user-generated content, but we have Hollywood videos on there. There are Hollywood movie studios that are releasing their films. Not quite the AAA titles, but there's some really good stuff on there. You can get David Cross movie, Julia Stiles movie, James Franco movie. So you can get real quality films via the LBRY network, and I think this area is only going to continue to grow. Because this idea that you can't get screwed over by a middleman, that the rules of the game can't change on you without your permission, that's really appealing to everyone. It's not just this censorship thing. It's really this idea that, like, do you want these giant companies to be able to play games with you? And that's no one wants that. It's not just, I'm worried that I'm going to get deleted, although that certainly has become a way bigger problem in the last year or two, where these Silicon Valley companies have become very censorious.
Getting back, you said that there's a cost involved, right? So can they charge money or charge LBRY crypto for people to access their content, or how does that work?
That's right, you can. So you can either price it in the native currency, or you can price it in US dollars, in which case the active exchange rate between the two is used for determining, because the payment's in the cryptocurrency no matter what. But you can set the price in dollars, in which case the actual cryptocurrency amount will adjust based off of the current price of the cryptocurrency.
Great. Well, to wrap up, where can people go if they want to find out more information about LBRY and Odysee and how they can get involved?
Yeah, it's real simple. If you want to do it the easy way, you go to odysee.com, ODYSE.com, create an account. You'll get some cryptocurrency for free for doing that. You follow VMblog on there. Of course, that's the first channel you follow.
Obviously.
Yeah, if you want to follow me, you can follow me too, KAUFFJ. I mostly post interviews of me. I don't have a show or anything, but if I do an interview, I repost it. But there's lots of great channels. You can go down the homepage, just follow them all. If you want to be a little bit more hardcore, if you are the Linux user, if you're the guy who holds their Bitcoin locally instead of using Coinbase, get LBRY Desktop, LBRY.com. You can download LBRY Desktop from there. There's more information about the technology on there. And we also have a website, LBRY.tech, which has resource guides, has articles. If you want to be installing the various components, if you want to play with them, we have Docker images for them. You can also run the source code directly, or we provide binaries. All of our code is open source, so our GitHub, it's all public. GitHub.com, LBRY.io is our handle there. And if you want to, write some code, get involved. Everyone we've ever hired, everyone we've ever hired that's been great, started as a contributor, came in, contributed some code. We love that. We'll help, we'll communicate with you, and we'll also give you some cryptocurrency if you contribute some code. So if you're an engineer and you want to get involved in that way, you can. If you want to build your own stuff, there's lots of information out there on how to do that as well.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, for coming on the show, and hopefully we get to speak with you again in the future.
Thanks, Brian. This was awesome.